It is Wednesday, the 6th of November, 2024. My name is Pigeon Rose, and this is my song of the day. We are once again talking about the Tragically Hip on this show because I just can't get enough. Because I just haven't stopped listening to them since I watched the documentary, frankly. And a lot of their songs have been stuck in my head, Grace 2 in particular. But another one that's been stuck in my head a lot is the song 50 Mission Cap. This is another one of theirs that's like a big fan favorite. It was a big hit single. It was the first song they played at their last ever concert. It came out in their album Fully Completely from 1992, which is, I don't know if it's their biggest hit overall, but I think it was like their first big, like, the Tragically Hip are a household name now sort of album, you know? And it's just a great song. I've already told you about the Tragically Hip. It's a very Canadian song because it tells a very specific story, so we'll get into that. But I think we should just go ahead and listen to it and then come back in a few minutes and talk about it. And that's 50 Mission Cap by the Tragically Hip. What a great song. It really feels like a first track to me. It really kicks off, which is why it makes sense to me that they opened their last concert with it. When I first watched their last concert, I was like, it's a strange one to open with when it's one like about a specific guy. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a Canadian story and it's a real good, like, let's get the energy going sort of song. So it makes complete sense to open the concert with it. So what's the song about? It's about Bill Barilko. I'm sure you noticed from the song, Bill Barilko was a hockey player. He was a defenseman for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he scored the goal that won the Stanley Cup for the Leafs in 1951. And then a few months later, he went on a fishing trip with his friend and then disappeared. And then they didn't find their wreckage because they went in a plane. They didn't find the plane until 11 years later, which happened to be the same year that the Leafs won the Stanley Cup again for the first time since Bill Barilko had disappeared. It's just such a really interesting story because it's just a weird coincidence, just one of those weird things of fate. Like, Bill Barilko scored a goal, he disappeared, the Leafs didn't win again, and the year they won again, his body showed up. Like, it's such a weird kind of confluence of events, but it's really interesting and not something that people from outside of Canada would know. Gord Downie specifically said that it was an Amelia Earhart story, except everyone's heard of Amelia Earhart, which is a fair point. I mean, everyone knows about Amelia Earhart. She disappeared in a plane and was possibly eaten by crabs. But, you know, people wouldn't necessarily know this Bill Barilko story unless they're A, Canadian, or B, know the Hip. And if you know the Hip, you're probably Canadian, you know? So it's a really interesting thing to tell, especially because it's from like the 50s, 60s. So a lot of the young Canadians wouldn't know the story anyway, you know? So he was kind of introducing a younger generation to it. Musically, it's just such a great rock song. I just love the bam, bum, 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 bam, bam. Like, it's got a great chugging feel to the riff, you know? And the drums are really locked in as well. I love it. So let's go through the lyrics. I basically just said them because the lyrics are just recalling the story. But Bill Barilko disappeared that summer. He was on a fishing trip. The last goal he ever scored won the Leafs the cup. They didn't win another till 1962, the year he was discovered. I stole this from a hockey card I keep tucked up under my 50 Mission Cap. So, as you can see, it just tells the story like I told it. Bill Barilko disappeared that summer. He was on a fishing trip. The last goal he ever scored won the Leafs the cup, right? They didn't win another till 1962, the year he was discovered. But then the next line is, I stole this from a hockey card. And in the documentary, No Dress Rehearsal, that I watched, they were talking about how Gord just like always carried a notebook around, and he'd hear some turn of phrase or he'd see something and he'd just like pull out the notebook and sketch it down, you know, and start writing a song. And apparently he really did just like see a hockey card telling this story, and then he started writing this song. The hockey card appears to be the card number 340 from the 1991 NHL Pro Set Hockey Card Series, which reads, Bill Barilko, the end of the innocence. Although he was not noted for his offensive skills, Bill Barilko scored one of the most celebrated goals in NHL history during the 1951 Stanley Cup Finals between Toronto and Montreal. This series was the only championship final that required overtime in every contest. In Game 5, the extra session was nearly 3 minutes old when Barilko spotted a loose puck near the Montreal crease. He dove in from the blue line and fired a shot over Montreal goaltender Jerry McNeil's outstretched arm to give the Leafs the cup. Unfortunately, it was the last goal of Barilko's career. He disappeared that summer on a fishing trip, and the Leafs didn't win another cup until 1962, the year his body was found. So you can see how the end of it there is like the skeleton of the verse. He just rephrased it. So he disappeared that summer on a fishing trip becomes Bill Barilko disappeared that summer. He was on a fishing trip, you know, just the little rephrasings. But you can imagine him just reading this card and being like, ooh, I could like work this into a verse. That's interesting. You know, I just find that really compelling as a writer myself, who carries around a notebook, just that thing of seeing something and writing it down, immediately working it into something. I love that. I'm a fan of that. Now, what's a 50 mission cap, you might ask? Well, a 50 mission cap is a military cap. You know, it's those like peaked caps you see military people wear. But a 50 mission cap specifically is supposed to represent that you've run 50 missions. And so they would be a bit worn. They would show kind of wear and tear from having run 50 missions. And younger people would apparently kind of beat up their caps to make them look like 50 mission caps, to make them look like they had more experience than they already did. And so that's why he says, I worked it in to look like that, to look like a 50 mission cap. You know, like he beat it up to make it look like a 50 mission cap. And so it confused me for a long time what relevance this has to the story of Bill Barilko. But, you know, he says, I stole this from a hockey card to keep tucked under my 50 mission cap. I worked it in to look like that. And it makes me think that he's kind of comparing how he didn't experience the Bill Barilko story. He stole the lyrics from a hockey card and he puts it in his cap that he is using to hide his lack of experience. Do you get what I mean? Like, I think that's what ties it in. Those are basically all the lyrics of the song. The rest of the song repeats itself. I mean, the chorus is just my 50 mission cap. I worked it in to look like that. It's my 50 mission cap. It's his 50 mission cap. And I worked it in, and I worked it in to look like that. And I worked it in to look like that. And then the second verse is just the first verse again, without the bit about stealing the hockey card, and with little backing vocals adding additional details. So it's Bill Barilko disappeared that summer in 1951. He was on a fishing trip in a plane. The last goal he ever scored in overtime won the Leafs the cup. They didn't win another until 1962, the year he was discovered. And then we just get the chorus again and repeating, it's my 50 mission cap. Just repeating that over and over again for the rest of the song. So even though the song's over 4 minutes, there's not too many lyrics because it just tells the story twice and that's about it. But I find it really compelling because the story is really interesting. The music is great. And also I think it feels more poetic because of the way the lyrics are worked into the song. I worked it in to sound like that. Because like it doesn't follow the music in the way that like a standard 4/4 sort of thing was. It's not like it's like Bill Barilko disappeared that summer. Long pause. He was on a fishing trip. Long pause. The last goal he ever scored. Pause. Won the Leafs the cup. Like, it's not a standard rhythm, you know what I mean? The music is a standard rhythm, but the lyrics don't fit where you think they would, and yet they sound perfect. It doesn't sound off, you know? I don't know how to describe that. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but to me it makes sense, and I really enjoy it. And that's pretty much gonna be it. I have had the song stuck in my head for weeks now, and I hope that you will too, because it certainly won't leave my head anytime soon. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Please hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think. Tell other people about the show. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Break it down. Unfortunately, it was the last goal of Barilsko.